Hey team, got another great question today, and that is at what pace should I run my tempo run at? And for a lot of athletes, it's a challenge to know exactly what specific pace you need to be running at your threshold effort or at your anaerobic threshold effort. And that's what I love about the V.02 platform that I use for my coaching when I work with athletes personally, because it takes your current personal best or where you're currently at in terms of your fitness and tells you exactly what pace you need to be running at easy pace, threshold pace, what pace you need to be hitting your repetitions at, your fast repetitions at, or your intervals are at. But in a lot of cases, the pace you need to be running your tempo runs at, it should be around 25 seconds slower than your 5K race pace. Okay, or when you're trying, or if you're going based off of heart rate, you want to run your tempo paces at anywhere from 85 to 89% of your maximum heart rates. Also consider that as one method of finding the exact heart rate you should be running at during your threshold. So take your maximum heart rate and take 85 to 89% of that maximum heart rate, and that'll give you a guesstimate of what pace, in terms of your heart rate, what pace you need to be running at, focusing on heart rate. A lot of times I think wearing a heart rate monitor and focusing on heart rate rather than worrying about what mile splits you're hitting or kilometer splits you're hitting is very, very effective, because it takes the focus off of worrying about that and just focus on your heart, or just focus on the heart rate. Okay. Always know that the less fit you are, your heart rate's going to be your paces per mile or paces per kilometer at that specific intensity that you're running at in terms of your heart rate. Your paces are going to naturally be much slower in the early going, when you're in the early stages of your buildup. Okay. If you're doing intervals, the paces per kilometer or paces, if you're doing repeat kilometers on the track or you're doing repeat 200s or 300s or 600s, any type of those intervals in terms of your paces are going to be drastically slower, and you're going to need more rest in between each one of those reps. But the faster and more fit you get, your heart doesn't have to work as hard. Your paces per kilometer or paces per mile, if you're doing tempo runs and you're, again, focusing on that 85 to 89% of your max heart rate, those are going to increase. You're going to get much faster, and you're not going to need as much time to recover from in between. If you're doing intervals, you're not going to need as much rest in between. And your paces per rep are going to be drastically faster. Okay. So again, if you're focusing on paces, focus on about 25 seconds per mile slower than your 5K pace, and it's usually around 15 to 20 seconds slower than your 10K race pace. So, and again, a lot of people out there ask this question, at what pace should I run my tempo run? Early on too, when I first got started in the sport in 1992, it was a total mystery to me as well. You go out there and you just kind of guess on what pace you need to be running at. And a lot of times for a lot of athletes, the problem, especially if you're training for longer races, a lot of times they're not running long enough at their anaerobic threshold. It's also called the lactate threshold. It's the point where we start to build up higher amounts of lactic acid. Again, the faster we run, the more energy is required. So it becomes more anaerobic. When you're running easy and you're running relaxed, you're running aerobically, you're not building up a large amount of lactic acid. So the body naturally is able to clear that lactic acid faster than it's building up. But when you go out and you do a tempo run and you're running at your threshold effort, your anaerobic threshold, it's the point where lactic acid starts to build up and starts to rise. That's where the true test of the athlete is going to come about. That's where the real results, if you're thinking long term, the legitimate results of your training are going to come from these types of workouts. The anaerobic threshold, the longer you train at that type of intensity, the better. Because again, you're improving your body's lactate tolerance. You're improving your body's ability to clear lactic acid faster than it's building up. So and that results in your ability to handle whatever your competition is throwing at you in the race. That might be surges that they start trying to pick up the pace in the race. I've had that happen to me several times, endless amounts of times, in marathons where the Kenyans or some other athlete tried to break me in the race by throwing in a 200-meter surge or a 300-meter surge, and I was always I was able to react better. A lot of times I could react to whatever they threw at me, and based on the fact that I was spending a longer period of time in my training doing longer tempo runs. Okay, so again, if you're training for say a 10 miler, I would focus on getting that tempo run out to around anywhere from around 6 to 8 miles in length. If you're doing a half marathon, getting the tempo run out to around 16 kilometers or 10 miles, I think is definitely sufficient. You don't start off doing tempo runs that long. Okay, so again, I always preach this to really focus on adaptation, periodization. Your tempo run early on when you're not very fit, that might be 2 to 3 miles or around 4 to 5 kilometers. Get to a point where you can get it out to around 3 miles or 5 kilometers in the early stages. Allow sufficient time for your body to react and to adapt to the training, which usually takes 3 to 4 weeks, and then start focusing on getting it out longer. If you're training for a marathon, I had a lot of times where my tempo runs would be anywhere from 10 to 14 to even out to around 15 miles in length when I was training for the marathon. I always felt like if I could train for that amount of length of time, training at my anaerobic threshold, I was really going to be very prepared when it came time to start dropping my volume and tapering down when it came down time for me to race my marathon. And it took several failures, some decent races to eventually break 2 hours and 20 minutes for the marathon. It definitely doesn't come overnight. Great anaerobic fitness will not occur overnight for sure. But again, if you're allotting sufficient time, you're training at the proper intensities, you're really focusing on your recovery and jogging on easy days, not worrying about what pace per mile or pace per kilometer you're running on those easy days. Those easy recovery runs are there for a reason. They're there to make sure that you adapt to the hard training you're doing, and so you can continue to really push the body hard and stress the energy systems of the body over a long period of time. I'm talking anywhere from 2 months out to 6 months in length. Always focus on this. The longer the buildup, in most cases, the better chance you have of getting a new personal best, because you're not cramming all of your training into a short amount of time. You're giving your body sufficient time to adapt to the hard training you're doing. And again, it does take around 21 days to 4 weeks for your body to adapt to a stress you're placing on it. So it takes time. And if you're trying to cram all of your training into a 2 month block of training, you definitely can do it. There are athletes out there that still go out and set personal best training for 8 weeks for a marathon, or even 12 weeks. 12 weeks is a better amount of time to train for a marathon, but I always recommend a minimum of 16 weeks and preferably anywhere from 20 to 24 weeks if you want to get it done correctly and you're not in a rush. But again, it comes down to each and every individual schedule too. A lot of people are working full-time jobs or part-time jobs. They're in school, taking care of other responsibilities, so they have a lot of things on their plate that they have to balance. And so it just depends on your schedule. But if you have the opportunity, definitely focus on a longer build-up. So that's my answer in terms of at what pace should I run my tempo run. Around 25 seconds slower than your 5K pace, or around 15 seconds slower to 20 seconds slower than your 10K race pace. Okay, if you're focusing on your heart rate, again, 85 to 89%, around that range of your max heart rate. So I hope this answers the question of, what pace should I run my tempo run. Feel free to leave me a comment below if you have any questions, or if you have any specific subjects you want me to cover in my next video. I will definitely respond to you, regardless if it's a question or a comment. If you're new to the channel, hit that bell icon and the subscribe button so when I make new videos, you'll be notified of it. And I wish you all the best in your training, and definitely wishing you all success in 2023.